Joker was written and directed by Todd Phillips, the man who is most known for his work on comedies like the Hangover trilogy and Old School. Is a unique oddity in the realm of superhero and comic book films because it's completely separate from all other previous Batman continuities that we have seen and presents a new original take on the origins of the Joker, possibly one of the most popular and well-respected villains in comic book history. In this particular story, we follow a man named Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, who in 1981 Gotham City, we see him as a sign twirler for various shops. But after a series of events that tear him apart from his family and kind of make him rethink his life and the world around him, we see him morph into the clown prince of crime, and this offers a unique perspective on the character that we had never seen previously. Now, before I open the floodgates and release my opinion on this movie, I should address that this particular film has been the subject of such insane and, I gotta be honest, stupid controversy from the beginning. Even months before this movie's release, there has been so much insane hype from comic book fans who thought this was going to be the greatest movie ever made. And now it seems that has definitely been fulfilled by the IMDb review score, which is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's about the same score that like The Godfather is given. Come on, guys. So I don't want to unpack the can of worms that is all the controversy surrounding gun violence. All that stuff is just stupid. And it kind of seems like an excuse for critics to basically snub out all of their hatred for comic book movies and try to have a personal vendetta against the genre. Media and violence is a topic for another video, so I'm not going to get into that here. I just want to talk about the movie itself, because I think it's worth it to just give Todd Phillips a chance, talk about his movie from a very unbiased and very fair perspective, rather than trying to put any politics into it. The good reviews I have seen from this movie have pretty much kept politics out of it, or at least if they do mention politics, they don't use that as some kind of weapon against the movie to say that because it doesn't align with their particular viewpoint, then it's bad. Or from another perspective, people who have a particular love for the comic book character and just use that as an excuse to praise specific sequences in this movie, I don't really see that as valuable criticism either. Every film deserves fair criticism despite subjective viewpoints, and even when I might like a certain film versus others because of my certain love for a franchise, like Star Wars for example, I still try to be as fair and non-judgmental as I can be, so I can provide an honest opinion of how I feel and how I think this movie will age over time. And so with that, I have to say that Joker, I think, is good. However, I do think there are significant problems with the movie that keep it from being the masterpiece that many people seem to deem it as. And like I said, it has nothing to do with controversy or anything that the movie has sparked among the Twitterverse. It's simply just the story itself. Many people have pointed out the very obvious similarities between Joker and Martin Scorsese films like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. I have nothing to say about the similarities between this and The King of Comedy because I was not able to watch this before seeing Joker, but having seen Taxi Driver, I can definitely say that Joker does use that Martin Scorsese masterpiece as a template for its story, but to have that be the main criticism for this movie I think is a cop-out because while this film certainly uses it as a template, I mean, there are many great films that have certainly modeled themselves after other films for its basis of inspiration, and then took original ideas and tried to do something unique with it. With that regard, I do think Joker successfully does enough to deviate itself from Taxi Driver to be its own movie. The key reason why to me, and of course many people have said this as well, but Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely magnetic in his role as Arthur Fleck. Me saying that Joaquin Phoenix is good in the movie is like saying that the Avengers movies have appeal because they have superheroes in it. It's obvious, and everyone is obviously going to go to this movie because Joaquin Phoenix is doing something interesting with the character. What I like about what he does with this iconic villain is that he adds a new perspective that is kind of similar to what we saw from him in The Killing Joke, and that he was just a sick tragedy. But I like the take that Todd Phillips provides in the writing, and that this particular version of the character was basically shunned by the society that he belonged to. And once Arthur Fleck deduced in his mind that basically life had nothing for him, he decided to just throw everything away and reinvent himself in such a way that he could find a brand new purpose, however maniacal and sadistic that might be. Both Joaquin Phoenix and the screenplay do well enough to show the path that the character takes from point A to point B and helps you understand and even empathize with the choices that this character makes to eventually become the clown prince of crime we know him to be. And of course there are subtle nuances in Joaquin Phoenix's performance too, with his physicality, his amazing interpretive dance sequences, which there are about a few of those in the movie. And I love the take that he provides with his laugh, too. There are so many iconic Joker laughs from, like, Mark Hamill. But Joaquin Phoenix showed a side of it that I didn't quite expect, but I appreciated the added perspective it brought to the condition of Arthur Fleck's mind. Take into consideration what that adds to his character, and I think it's quite fascinating. Basically, what it amounts to is us understanding that this character is the result of society not thinking anything of people who are mentally ill. If someone was to argue that this movie was stigmatizing people with mental illness, then I can't really argue with that, because there is certainly a discussion to be had with that angle. But I like that this movie at least does well enough to help the audience realize that there is a legitimate and very needed discussion we should have about helping the mentally ill, and perhaps there might be some reasons to why potential disasters with like gun violence and any other type of mass violent incident that could be linked to people not being treated for their mental illness. Does the film offer additional commentary on that? Not necessarily, which I do consider to be a problem, but at least this story did well enough to raise the question, and I hope that people will eventually shift their conversation up to that, instead of just provoking all this hate speech and all this hysteria about what this film was going to have an effect on. So those aspects of the story are good, but the core plot itself I do find kind of problematic, because half of it is about uncovering these mysteries from Arthur Fleck's childhood, that honestly I don't think are going to hold up that much on a second or third viewing, because the movie spends a lot of time on these mysteries and trying to uncover secrets and details about his past, and a lot of the time is just spent on the mysteries themselves and not necessarily what they implicate. And so I kind of feel like if I was going to watch this movie again, those sequences would drag, because they aren't so much about developing the character himself as they are just kind of finding reasons in the plot to basically explain how the character got from where he was to eventually where we know him to be. If this movie was a better character study, I think those plot points would have been more subtle and more artful in their execution, kind of like Taxi Driver. That movie may be slow and deliberate, but at least we understand why the man gets to where he eventually does in becoming a murderous sociopath, because the specific plot points in the movie are kind of intermingled with everything that you see, and you don't necessarily see where the plot is going. It honestly just moves and is fascinating because of the camera work, the dialogue, and the performances all mesh together into something that is just seamless. Whereas with Joker, it's more easy to see where the plot is going, and once you understand certain things about the character, it becomes predictable. And there are even some plot holes with the movie too, where you see Arthur Fleck make certain drastic decisions that in the moment are very shocking and definitely had an impact on me. But as I thought about those decisions afterwards and considered the logical implications of what he was doing and how he dealt with that, it honestly didn't really sell that what Arthur Fleck was going to be this masterful criminal. On one hand, this is the character we're seeing from the beginning, not necessarily when he's a criminal mastermind, but I would like to think that this character wasn't dumb on top of having his mental conditions. The version of the character that we see here compared to the Jokers that we see in the comics, all the different versions of the Joker that we see in the comics are basically criminal geniuses. But because of the decisions that Arthur Fleck makes in this movie, despite their boldness and the impact that they have on Gotham City, I wouldn't necessarily consider him to be that consistent with what we understand the Joker to eventually be. Perhaps I'm missing a point here, but that's just kind of how I felt about it. Otherwise, yes, this movie does drag in the first couple of acts. I was interested and I was invested because of the performances, and the dialogue was interesting enough. There was a clear sign while I was watching this movie that there was kind of a disconnect between Todd Phillips wanting to make this very artsy and original take on comic book movies, while the studio heads in the background were like, well, we still want to have this to have like blockbuster elements, so you need to have the dialogue be a bit more obvious. And one aspect of the movie that I do consider to be a poor attempt at helping us understand his psyche is the aspect of this girl that he lives near in his apartment complex. Without really saying anything about where this plot line goes, I just thought it was kind of unnecessary to the story. And if they cut it out from the narrative, I mean, you wouldn't know so much about how he envisioned the world around him. But I just don't think it really added much, and it was kind of silly in execution. But other than the problems with the story, I think Joker is well executed enough. I mean, between its performances from Joaquin Phoenix, Robert de Niro is also great in the movie. And then I have a huge respect for those who are behind the camera work, the set design, and the musical score especially. The music by Hildur does an excellent job at heightening the mood when it needs to be, and perfecting the tone that Todd Phillips was seeking after. The biggest thing I can praise for Todd Phillips is that he was able to manage the tone of this movie so successfully. And even in the moments where there could have been unintentional laughter, I do feel that every moment that they're trying to hit with the tone was on point. And the musical score, which is very atmospheric and haunting, definitely helped with that. In general, the cinematography is also quite magnetic to watch too. Even though there weren't really many creative shots to look at, it did its job, and it's also highlighted by the fact that the crew did an excellent job at making Gotham City feel like a run-down version of New York City in the 80s. That was a nice touch, and it definitely helped me understand more of why Arthur Fleck would have made the turn that he did and had such a profound impact on Gotham City at the time. Overall, I think Joker was a problematic movie and definitely nowhere near as hype as some people have considered it to be. But it is worth seeking out because I like the perspective it adds to the original character, and then the conversations that it intends to start I think are interesting and are needed in our daily discourse. Plus, there's another thing I want to mention. Even though I haven't seen any of Todd Phillips' other movies besides Joker, I think it's kind of unfair to use his past filmography as like an attack on his decision to make something like Joker, which is more serious and intensive and artful. People basically trying to shame him for his past, I think, is extremely hypocritical. When we look at something like Chernobyl, for example, the writer of the Chernobyl miniseries, which is now considered to be one of the best ever by IMDb users and critics, is previously known for writing a lot of the dumb parody comedies that are the brunt of cinephile mockery. And yet, in reviews of Chernobyl, I don't see anybody trying to shame Craig Mazin for making those previous movies. They just appreciated the art that he made in Chernobyl. But again, I feel like people shaming Todd Phillips for making Joker is possibly just some kind of problem that they have with comic book movies and using that to basically punish Todd Phillips for trying to add to the genre. I think everyone deserves a shot at wanting to make the art that they want to make, no matter what choices they made in the past, although some people are certainly worthy of their public shaming. So I would hope that people would take this as a lesson in thinking that even though some artists may make some bad movies in the past, we should always hope for successes and not wanting to see them fail. In the end though, I do like Joker. It has problems, but I think it is worth seeing. With that, I'm giving Joker a B. As far as an age recommendation goes, the violent content in this movie has definitely been exaggerated by the media. Yes, there are disturbing kills and violent sequences in the movie, possibly the most disturbing in which a character is stabbed in the neck by a pair of scissors, and then stabbed in the head with it, and then his head is banged into the wall several times before he's viciously killed. But I mean, in comparing this to Taxi Driver, that movie, in its final sequence, has more blood, gore, and intense violence than this movie in its entirety. And when you look at films like the John Wick franchise, particularly the third movie, with just the gruesome kills that are in those, I mean, looking at this by comparison, people are angry because of the tone of this movie, but never once did I feel that Joker was condoning the violence it was depicting. It is disturbing, yes, it is shocking, but I don't think the actual violent content in this movie will inspire anybody to be serial murderers. On top of that, there isn't really much sexual content to write home about, and the language is there, and it's profane at times, but I've seen movies that are worse. In the end, I would probably say this is best for anyone who's at least 16 years old. Thank you so much for watching. I know this review was a little bit late coming, but that's because I took a vacation to San Diego with my family, so I wanted to spend time with that, and then once I was situated back in a normal life, I wanted to focus my time on editing then. Look forward to more reviews of movies and video games coming very soon. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It helps me grow my content here on the channel. And feel free to ring the bell if you want notifications for every single time I post. Otherwise though, thank you for watching as always, and I hope you have a good one.